How do you make an intro? I've been on a bit of a Metroidvania kick recently for, reasons that might surprise you. While I was reminiscing about some of my favorites like Metroid Zero Mission, Aria of Sorrow, or Hollow Knight, one game eventually reappeared both in my head and in my Steam library: Momodora. Momodora is a 2D action platforming series about exploring a map, collecting stuff, fighting bosses, Metroidvanias with a dash of sadness and a mean holy spirit. At least, that's what the series would lean further into as it went on. Each game features a few different protagonists with their own reasons for doing the things they do, and varying levels of both plot and plot. Why do they fight with a leaf? I don't know. One of them gets a gun. That's kinda cool. That never comes up again. They aren't typically front and center with the story. It mostly boils down to being about a holy woman trying to combat whatever curse happens to be plaguing the lands. It's the background you pay attention to, the environmental storytelling, a character's origins and their dialogue, the descriptions of certain items. It may not be spelled out for you, but there are still things you can look into and infer about the world. There will not be much story to mention in this video. I want to look at the games that started it all. The first 3 games, to be precise. Why these 3? 2 reasons. 1, I haven't played any other games aside from Reverie, and I wanted to see the roots of the series for my own curiosity's sake. And 2, mostly because they're not that dissimilar from each other in terms of size. Their stories are pretty quick to get through, and the gameplay is not too complicated to warrant needing over 13 minutes to explain it to you. The other games are a bit larger in scope, and also longer as well. If I ever talk about those, they'll get their own video. 2 things to note. Momodora 1 and 2 do not natively have controller support, and 3 is an odd case. It started working, sort of, until it suddenly didn't. You'll have to download something like Joy-to-Key if you want to play with a controller. Secondly, make sure you turn the games down in your volume mixer when you launch it, otherwise you might be in for a very loud introduction. From the top then, Momodora 1 takes place in the lands of Koho, where maidens are sacrificed in the hopes of making the world a better place. Wait, what? One day, an orphan by the name of Isadora, our protagonist, would seek to enter the Forbidden Lands, described as the sacred shrine Terra Altar, to resurrect her mother who she had lost to these sacrifices. In this shrine is rumored to be a certain item that can bring the dead back to life for a price. Disregarding that last bit of information, Isadora makes a mad dash to the shrine, hoping to obtain the item and reunite with her mother. And that's basically the premise for this game. Not much is really explained or elaborated on here, except for the sacrifices kind of. It's just kind of, here's what you do, now do it. Makes sense, I guess. This game is supposed to be action-focused and arcadey. There's some things that kinda give you tidbits of lore, but the story isn't too expanded upon past the intro. But that's okay. The later games will sorta make up for this. While there isn't really a lot of world building in this game, the world itself is very much alive and very much out to kill you. You explore a set of linear levels collecting stuff while killing enemies and trying not to die. You find weapons and items throughout the game, but you can also find these other items that go into your inventory. These are important because I honestly don't know if these have a purpose, or if they're just there for the sake of having something to collect. If you happen to know, let me know so we can both know together and revel in this beautiful knowing circle we call knowledge. There's also these crystals you can find throughout the game. Blue ones are usually in between levels and save your game while fully healing you. These grayer looking ones are just full heals, the pink ones are switches, and the transparent ones give you information about something, some more informative than others. As for controls, you can move, jump, bap things, use items, die, and swap weapons and items. For the most part, it's pretty manageable, though some rooms are quite mean sometimes. Could also be me, but it feels like the character hitbox is a little wonky. It feels like there were times there were gaps I could totally fit through that I just can't, I guess. Same with enemy attacks. Sometimes I feel like I'm far enough away and then I just take damage anyway. You get exactly 5 max hit points throughout the entire game, with enemy attacks taking 1 off of you, spikes taking 4, healing spots being infrequent, and iframes being pretty short. You can't exactly rush through everything, but you shouldn't linger too long either, else you risk getting hit by a homing projectile. And since I am not a speedrunner, getting a feel for each room and developing a strategy over time was pretty much how I got by. Until late game, that is. I'm sure this is pleasant to look at. As for any other things of note, the music is okay. There's maybe one standout track, but it's otherwise pleasant to listen to, though it feels like there's a bit of a lack in sound effects, things just not having much punch to it. Also, I find it funny that there's no death animation or game over screen when you die. It just boots you back to the main menu. The final boss, or maybe just the boss, is fine. It consists of a few phases of varying difficulty, but it is manageable. Though there is a mean run back if you die here. You gotta go through the entire last stage again just to get a rematch. Really, my biggest gripe with this game is how much flashing and screen shaking there is. The screen shaking isn't great, but it's not as unbearable. The flashing is just much worse. It flashes when you hit a crystal, and especially when you're playing tennis with the final boss. If you are epileptic, do be careful. Otherwise, Momodora 1 is alright. It's not something that'll stick with you for a while or be something you might want to replay anytime soon, unless you want to do time attack, which is basically a speedrun mode. But for what it is perfectly inoffensive. Something you play all the way through in an hour or two, then move on. And as a first game, it's fine. While it's not the most glamorous first impression, everything's gotta start somewhere. Right? Momodora 2 is the direct sequel to the first game. Shocker, I know. It focuses much more on exploration and character progression, leaning into being more Metroidvania than arcadey. You play as Momo, a priestess on a mission to banish an evil entity that resides near Koho village. The README file states that Isadora was cursed after entering the sacred shrine from the first game, and became an underworld queen that's terrorizing the lands. In other words, our protagonist from the first game, and everyone else, is now facing the consequences of her actions, and Momo's the only one that can do something about it. There's actually a couple endings that you can get this time around. Which one you get depends on whether or not you get a certain item, but before you can do that, you gotta explore. This game, inversely to the first one's levels, has one connected map. Different sections of the map take you to different areas. You'll have to explore each area at least once to get what you need to beat the game. Throughout the game, you'll also find these statues you can pray to in order to fill up this meter at the top right of the screen. I don't know if this serves any other purpose, but this is also required to beat the game. On top of the basic movement stuff from the first game, you now get a double jump and a dash. Double jumping is self-explanatory, but the dash is only activated through double tapping the movement key. Personally, I wish I could bind the dash to its own button so I could use it on demand more easily, but I guess it's better than nothing. You don't get extra weapons like in the first game. Instead, you get these seals that basically serve as a ranged attack. These are also required to open up certain sections of the map. This is honestly fine. Swapping between weapons was a little cumbersome, and there were only like 2 usable items you could find in the first game, only one of them actually being important to beating the game, so having just the one doesn't affect me. Exploration itself, like the first game, is linear and relatively unremarkable. There's not too much backtracking, unless you're like me and you completely miss something important that's hiding away in the bottom right corner of the map and waste 20 minutes trying to find it. And movement in itself doesn't feel bad, though aerial movement feels a little wonky to me. Most of the time, finding secrets is just health upgrades too, so meh. I like how the camera moves to each room as you enter it instead of just loading you into it. It does make it feel like each room is more connected to each other. In terms of difficulty, if we're comparing this one to the first game, I'd say this one's easier. Having health upgrades certainly helps, but enemies also don't really hit that hard. Sometimes. You can still die pretty quick if you just flail your arms wildly into the wind, but death's not as punishing here either. Save points, these little bells you can whack, are pretty generously placed throughout the map. Even if I got low on health, I could find a save point just a couple rooms away from me and be right back to full. And if I did die, the run back would be completely painless. Should I also mention that I used Droidkey to play on controller? That might have helped. As far as actual plot, well, there's characters you can talk to this time. They have their own little side plots going on. You'll meet them as you go and learn a little about the world. It doesn't go that deep, but I guess it is better than nothing. Let's see what else. There are 2 more bosses this time around. A fight against an angry knife thrower, and a rematch against the angry knife thrower. Not much to say about them. They're certainly boss fights. The final boss actually has the same issue I had with it in the first game, playing tennis and turning the screen into a safety hazard. The screen effects were actually pretty reasonable up to this point too. All in all, Momodora 2 is certainly a step up in overall game and quality. I'd actually say it's pretty good for being a free game. Like the first game though, I don't think much of it will actually stick with me for a while. But while there's similar cases, this game is just more substance. The music's good, the art looks good, and there is kind of a story. If you wanted to kill a couple hours, this can definitely do it. Momodora 3 is a sort of return to the gameplay structure of Momodora 1. By that, I mean levels. A progression system similar yet different from the first game. I'll mention it in a bit. Right when you start a new game, you're given the choice to either play as Momo or Isadora, the game just referring to her as Dora. My first playthrough I went with Momo, mostly because she was the character my cursor started on. I don't think this choice actually matters outside of some very tiny dialogue changes though, so just pick your favorite, I guess? The story is in the README file, and it's not much. This time around, apparitions have been appearing around Koho Village, and Momo and Isadora take to the scene to investigate. There isn't even an introduction this time around. You quite literally just spawn in and hit the ground running. There's some side characters to be found, though they mostly just give you lore. They don't really add anything too imperative to your adventure, though I will say that, as someone who played Reverie before these games, it was pretty cool seeing a certain character show up in a side quest. Similar to the first game, you run across a level, bap enemies, don't die. I said don't die! The key difference with these levels is that it feels like there's a little more to find than in the first game. You'll come across forks in the road here and there. One leads to progress, the other some possible goodies, and sometimes just a floor full of death. Sometimes you find a hidden passageway that gives you extra money or a new item. Upgrades are very different too. There aren't any movement upgrades like the double jumping or dashing this time. You'll find items throughout the game that add different effects to you when you equip them. Some of these increase survivability, some are used for money farming, and some directly increase your damage potential. You find a handful of them just by exploring the levels, but you can also buy them with the purple gems, whatever the currency is called here. The price is a little hefty, but it's there for those who aren't against a little grinding. Actually, there's only one item you need to beat the game, and it's the key that unlocks the door to progress in the first level. Everything else can technically be ignored, but you would be nerfing yourself quite a bit if you did. And don't worry, you can always warp back to older levels if you miss stuff. You get 3 item slots to start with, and when you go to New Game Plus, you get an extra one. From what I read, apparently this stacks multiple times, meaning every time you went to New Game Plus, you get an extra item slot. I never played past the first New Game Plus though, so I can't prove it, and aside from wrapping up 100%, there isn't really a reason to replay the game outside of just speedrunning it, or getting all the achievements, or just because the game is fun. Oh yeah, it is fun by the way. All the games have been enjoyable, but I think of the 3, this one plays the best. The movement feels smooth, attacking has a bit of weight to it, and screen flashing and other on-screen effects are very minimal this time around. Aside from like, maybe an enemy placement here or there, it just feels good to run through the levels. Not to insinuate the other 2 didn't, but this one just stood out to me much more. Animations also feel much more fluid. It's very much a step up in the sights, sounds, and atmosphere. In terms of difficulty, I'd say it's about the same as 2, just without the health upgrades. The game has difficulty modes, but they basically just affect your max health and whether or not you start with the Dream Ring, which gives you extra defense and longer iframes. But even on hard where you don't start with it, you can still get it later. It's not too hard to set up and shred through bosses either, which I'd say only becomes easier on hard mode because of one particular item. Ceremonial Fabric. Oh, you fucked it up. Oh, you fucked up. Super boss, by the way. I bet the speedruns for this game are pretty cool. I think there's some pretty cool concepts for bosses, but they aren't very interesting here. I guess they haven't really been up to this point, but to me, the ones here are either too easy, too bland, or just a mix of the two. I guess it does better than the second game by having a variety at least. But in spite of my criticisms, where the second game felt like a step forward, this game feels like a leap ahead of the past 2 games in a lot of aspects. If I had any major gripes, I'd just say it left me wanting for more. You get this big, somber build-up to the final boss in the last stage, you fight the boss, and then it just ends. Nothing is really explained to you or mentioned. I don't even know who this person is. I only learned after beating her that she was apparently the one behind this incident. Now I understand, it was probably a fairly small team and they could have only done so much, and in total fairness to this game, this is also how the first 2 games ended. But I would have liked to see something more conclusive than just, "Congratulations, you beat the video game!" and then a fade into credits. Would have liked to at least see the fruits of my labor, or the consequences of my actions. Aside from that though, I still think it's a pretty good game. It has some nice pixel art, some very good music to fit the vibes, and the items, as simple as they are fun to mess with. It's about the same length as the first and second game too, so yeah. Momodora 1, 2, and 3 are perfectly fine games, though they aren't very long or outstanding ones. You can grab the first 2 games off itch right now for free if you want to, and 3 is on Steam for $2. I think if I could only recommend one of these games, I would recommend 3 if you can spare the money. Otherwise, 2 is a perfectly okay alternative. I know, right? Some people might think, why would I want to play this when there are so many other games out there I could be spending my time on? And I get it. There are and will be larger or just more fulfilling experiences out there. I think most people today will probably take a look at these and see them as products of their time. And they kind of are. Ardane, who I believe is the main head of Bomb Service, said it themselves in a reply to a Steam comment that these games have not aged well, in their opinion. But I don't think that makes them not worth your time. Really, at the end of the day, what people find fun in a game is very subjective. If you want my conclusive opinion on these games, I think it's a series of games that only gets better the further up you go. And since the story is pretty limited, there's nothing wrong with skipping these past entries if they don't appeal to you. But I think there's still some fun to be had here if you want something that doesn't require much time commitment, eye strain aside. In other words, I think they justify the price tag, and or the lack thereof. I'd say play them all if they look fun, or if you just want to see how the series started. If you don't care, or don't think it looks fun at all, then don't. These are just meant to be fun little games people can enjoy for an afternoon. If anything, playing these just made me appreciate the series more. It's cool seeing these little one-off experiences serve as a template for something more grand in scope. And in a day and age where most games go from like 20 to hundreds of hours long, I don't think it's bad to play a quick one-off game every now and then, as long as you're having fun.